Hello, everyone. I'm Allison, and this is Play It Forward on WUSB Stony Brook 90.1 and 107.3 FM. Happy Friday, everyone. In the studio with me is the Play It Forward think tank, Kurt, Taylor, Chloe, Aisha, Ishrat, Arcadia, Serena, and Olivia. Today's guest is Drew Scott, an award-winning former News 12 Long Island news anchor and reporter. We will introduce and interview Drew momentarily. But here's Taylor to tell you about our show.
The Play It Forward Project is a nonprofit organization composed of Stony Brook community members whose mission is to bring awareness, education, and advocacy to the fentanyl opioid crisis. We regularly bring on guests to speak on the topic and share their stories and perspectives. And at the end of our show, around 11:50 p.m., we offer various harm reduction, treatment, and recovery resources that are available to all people. We speak live every other Friday from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so stay tuned. So let's talk about fentanyl, a synthetic opioid up to 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine.
Pharmaceutical fentanyl was introduced in 1959, a synthetic opioid painkiller used to treat extreme pain. This type is legally manufactured and distributed to healthcare professionals in the U.S. Illicit fentanyl is cheap to produce and incredibly potent. It is produced mainly in Mexico. Cartels use precursor compounds from China to manufacture massive amounts of fentanyl products. Too many fentanyl pills, powders, and blocks are being smuggled, further fueling the national epidemic. Currently, fentanyl is the #1 cause of death among adults ages 18 to 45. Fentanyl is an odorless and its color can be off-white, tan, or even brown.
In 2022, the DEA seized over 57.9 million fentanyl-laced fake pills and more than 13,400 pounds of fentanyl powder. The 2022 seizures are equivalent to more than 400 million lethal doses of fentanyl. The 2023 fentanyl seizures represent nearly 78.1 million deadly overdoses. That alone is enough to give every American a lethal dose 3 times over, or equivalent to a jetliner crashing every single day. Wow. It's time to wake up and do something about this monumental problem. Illicit fentanyl is being added to many street drugs such as heroin, coke, meth, to increase profits and potency, often disguised as those drugs. It is also being hidden in pressed pills and made to look exactly like oxycodone, Adderall, Xanax, or other benzodiazepines.
One pill can be deadly, and now it is not the time to experiment, share, nor trust pills that were not prescribed to you, even for what may seem like legitimate medical reasons like panic attacks, insomnia, focus, or physical pain. The DEA has discovered that 6 out of 10 pills that contain fentanyl may contain a potentially lethal dose, and many buyers are unaware. As little as 2 milligrams can kill most people. Those who are opioid naive or have been abstinent for some time following active addiction and who have relapsed are most at risk for overdose. Recovery is possible, and according to SAMHSA, an estimated of 23 million people are living symptom-free in recovery. There are multiple pathways to recovery, and one size doesn't fit all.
Fentanyl test strips are available at many harm reduction and recovery organizations and also online through tansafe.org and amazon.licadd, LICADD. Also has them available for Long Islanders included in their Narcan kits. So please carry Narcan. Have one at home. Also, please stick to the station. We will provide further free confidential outreach resources and substance misuse and harm reduction resources.
Did you know that over 200 people die every day from overdoses related to synthetic opioids like fentanyl? According to the Center for Disease Control, in 2022, there were 117,477 overdose deaths, primarily driven by the spread of illicit fentanyl.
Or 9/11 happening every 2 weeks. If that occurred, the media coverage would be much more. So I'm glad whoever is listening is doing so. Now that we are armed with general information about this problem, here's Allison to introduce our guest.
Thank you, Serena, and thank you, everyone. So I'd like to welcome longtime award-winning journalist and now advocate, Drew Scott, to the show. On behalf of Play It Forward and WUSB, we welcome you and thank you so much for being here with us today, and of course for your work and your service. Welcome, Drew. Please introduce yourself to our listeners and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much, Allison. It's great to be here and be with you. I'm just so happy that you're sharing all this good information with our listeners. It's life-saving information. And just the other day, we were at a conference up in North Hempstead town, and we had this little demonstration. It's too bad we don't have TV. We could show it to you on TV, but imagine a penny. Just a penny and a tiny speck of dust on the right of the penny, which represents 2 milligrams.
Yep.
And that can kill a normal human being. Just 2 milligrams. And that's the problem we're facing today with the fentanyl poisoning. We used to call it overdoses, but now it really is more accurate to call it poisoning.
Yeah.
I lost my granddaughter, Hallie Rae Ulrich, in 2017 to fentanyl poisoning.
I'm so
and I just ever since then I've decided, and my family has as well, to go public and let everybody know how dangerous this substance is and how dangerous addiction is. It's a disease, and it affects a lot of people. And there is a way out. There is recovery. That's what's so encouraging about this information. Now, a number of your co-guests on the program today are either in CASAC or caseworker programs at Stony Brook, and they're learning to help treat this terrible disease of addiction. And the important thing is, if you're listening and you are addicted, there is recovery, and recovery is possible. There is hope.
100.
There is hope.
Well,
That's what we want people to know.
Drew, thank you very much for your bravery and your courage to come public, you and your family. That's incredibly admirable. I lost my brother to an overdose, and your family really is never the same. It's very difficult. But you have had such a fantastic career with such distinction, and shortly after you retired, right, you lost your granddaughter, your beautiful granddaughter, Hallie. We read how talented and artistic she was. Can you please tell us a little bit about Hallie?
Yeah, Hallie was a twin. She was 22 years old. She and her sister had generous scholarships to art universities in New York City. Hallie was at Pratt, and Ellison was at SVU, and they were enjoying their studies. They were very talented. During her summers, Hallie would work at behind the fence gallery in Southampton, where she colored, painted figurines and objects. If you drive out to Southampton, sometimes you pass by that behind the fence gallery and see dinosaurs and cartoon figurines are all painted. Well, she was one of the artists involved in painting those things. She was very talented and 22 years of age, born and raised on Long Island, and she lived in Sag Harbor. She had a boyfriend who introduced her to heroin. We were unhappy about it, and we tried to separate them many times, but she was in love with this guy, and I guess he wanted her to share his misery with him. And so she did that to please him. And one day on September 27th in 2017, they were camping just after a few weeks after her birthday. in East Hampton, and she overdosed and took what she thought was an injection of heroin. And he always injected her, and I guess unbeknownst to him, it was laced with fentanyl, and she, of course, was poisoned. She died almost immediately. There was no Narcan available. He panicked. He tried to call for help. He called 911, but the phone call bounced over to Connecticut because of where they were in East Hampton. So he wrapped her in a blanket and dumped her body on the side of a road in East Hampton. And he took her car, he took her purse, he took her credit card, and he went to Southampton to an ATM, withdrew money from her account, and went and bought more fentanyl laced with heroin. And the police found her body later that morning. They didn't know who she was. She had no identification on her. And so she went unidentified for almost 24 hours. And I remember I was working that day, and I remember hearing a story about an unidentified young woman found in East Hampton. And I thought, what a terrible thing, what a horrible thing, what a lonely place to be lost on the side of the road, wrapped in a blanket and left. He went home. The police called when they realized that he was the boyfriend and was connected with her, and wanted to speak with him the next morning. They made an appointment with him, and he overdosed and poisoned himself that night, and he died the next day. So they both were taken by fentanyl. We did not find her phone because we wanted to find who the drug dealer was that sold them the stuff, and we could never get a hold of her phone until it was too late. It would have been a good thing to be able to catch the person who sold them the drugs, but we couldn't do that either. So unfortunately, both their deaths went without justice, unfortunately. But I firmly believe God's the final judge. And karma will probably take shape somehow. But the next best thing to do is public awareness. So rather than giving into the stigma of losing a family member to fentanyl poisoning, I decided to speak out and really let people know how nobody is immune from this terrible plague that's going through this country. So I decided to speak out and use my position in the community and my name and image to be able to let people know that no family is safe from this terrible scourge that's going through our country. As you said earlier, 117,000 people died in the previous year from overdoses or poisonings, and the number could be larger. Sometimes these deaths are listed as unknown, or sometimes listed as suicide or accidental or heart attack, when it really is fentanyl poisoning. So the number could be much higher. That's what's very scary. But no family, if you're listening and you have a wonderful family and you feel you've got all your ducks in a row, just take it from me. Nobody is immune from this terrible thing that's going around the country, because it's everywhere, and we need to fight it and be aware of what's going on.
Drew, thank you so much for all of that. I mean, it's amazing you have become such a outspoken advocate for this cause. We all feel the same way, and you know, you should be very proud of the work that you're doing. Hallie would be, I'm sure she's looking over you and with you through this fight. So your family was aware of her addiction.
Yes.
And to help, we understand she did a 28-day course at Seafield Center for Recovery, right?
Yes. Insurance covered it.
Okay.
And then after 28 days, they're not reimbursed any longer. So they toss you out on the street and they get somebody else in. But a habit, a disease can't be cured in just 28 days. It'd be miraculous. We wish it would happen, but it just doesn't happen that way. And people have gone on a number of years before they reach recovery. And that's why one of the things about our task force that we helped set up in Southampton Town and Islip and Huntington, as well as in North Hempstead, is to get the insurance companies to cover more of the rehabilitation and outpatient service for people who have this recovery, because it just doesn't go away after 28 days.
Absolutely. I mean, it takes a lot longer for the problem to evolve.
Right.
So I think it's wonderful that you are also speaking on that topic of the need for insurance to cover longer stays in inpatient facilities,
right?
And the function of detox centers itself. Why do you think it is essential to have more of them?
Because the problem since the pandemic has grown proportionately. Imagine for the past 3 years, people being indoors, confined to their homes, and maybe they had their addiction as part of their disease, and it only added to the problem. It made it worse, and we're in worse shape now than we were 3 years ago or 4 years ago, when through public awareness, we were able to get a lot of people on the road to recovery. So the pandemic railroaded a lot of our good efforts, and now we're trying to make up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you really bring such a human side of this, like people think these are just numbers and this isn't going to affect my family. And it, like you said, it can affect anybody. And each person who has died, they have a story and a family, and it's like these are human beings. And there's such a high need for recovery resources, for insurance. Everybody needs to be on board, and a lot of times the insurance companies will deny coverage, or they'll make sure that you fail at IOP before authorizing approval of long-term treatment, like an inpatient stay. And like you mentioned, there's not enough resources, not enough detoxes, rehabs, halfway houses. This is a chronic problem, and it needs ongoing support and compassion. It's really inspiring how you've, turned your grief into activism. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about what it's like to be, the co-chair of the Southampton Opioid Task Force and what's involved with that.
It was a traumatic time for me because I was just in the process of leaving News 12 and going into retirement, and then this thing happened, and the town supervisor of Southampton called me and expressed his condolences, and we both came up with the idea that this is a growing problem in the town of Southampton, and we have to do something. So we both decided to form a task force for opioid addiction, and it's now called the Behavioral Committee as well, because we found that it's not, the old feeling was that somebody who was involved in addiction was somebody who was homeless, or maybe somebody who was a vagrant, had been living on the streets, had no job, and they were constantly shooting up in the alleyways and back streets. And it's just not that way anymore. The new form of addiction is that one pill can kill because fentanyl is so powerful. And there's a new drug now that everybody calls crank that's out there. And it used to be Narcan would reverse the effects of an opioid overdose or opioid addiction. But crank is impossible to turn around, and Narcan doesn't work against that. So it's just a terrible thing. And nowadays, the addict could be your mother, your father, your grandfather, your grandmother. It could be your aunt or uncle. It could be your son or daughter, because one pill can kill. It doesn't have to be somebody who's living on the street or living in an alleyway who shoots up every day.
Right.
Absolutely. Addiction doesn't discriminate. It affects people of all different ages, socioeconomic. It's not like this picture that people envision of, like somebody, homeless under a bridge, shooting up. Yes, that does, that is a reality for some people, but it could be your honor child, your honor student child who's involved in extracurricular activities, or your father who's, a successful businessman. It impacts everybody. And yeah, I'm so incredibly sorry, for your loss. It's never ever easy listening to stories like this from people who have lost, loved ones. And I can only imagine how absolutely traumatic that was for you. I was wondering, from your experience as a grandfather and the co-chair, what is the most important message for people to hear regarding this crisis?
Everybody can play a role in fighting addiction and fighting opioid abuse or drug abuse. It might not be drugs. It could be alcohol. It could be tobacco. It could be sex addiction. It could be gambling addiction. It's a disease, and it affects a lot of people nowadays. And it starts, unfortunately, sometimes with a gateway. It might be for Hallie. She experimented with marijuana in high school, and that then you become, I guess, programmed to feel that drugs aren't as dangerous as they are, and you gradually move up the ladder in drugs. And she took a chance with her boyfriend getting involved in heroin, unfortunately, and she fought it valiantly. I mean, she really wanted to get into rehab and to recovery permanently, but she was in love with this guy, and he was just poison to her in more ways than one, and kept dragging her down, unfortunately. We found in our task forces that we've helped to set up that it's sometimes there other factors involved in addiction. Most likely heredity is the one thing that is a factor that's very common. If there's a family member in the past who had an addiction, it's very likely that they're going to get involved in addiction. So that's what's very, very dangerous. The other factors would be a trauma of some kind. Now, there was a trauma with Hallie's family because when she was very young, she and her sister they experienced a divorce, and it was difficult for them both, and they went through that, and there was a fight over who would have custody of the two girls, and it was ugly at times, and that was a trauma for them both. So I think trauma is involved in a lot of cases of addiction.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Trauma, heredity, and another thing is mental issues, underlying mental issues. It could be bipolar, it could be depression, and a lot of these good kids are trying to cure the pain of the trauma or their mental issues by taking a drug and get involved unwittingly in drug abuse and addiction. And that's a shame, a very, very sad thing. So if what we're trying to get in the part of the behavioral committee is to let people know if they have any of these warning signs in their family, that they could be susceptible to addiction, and to be careful, to put up their guard.
proactive, right?
Be proactive, correct.
Yeah. I mean, we stress that a lot on the show. Parents talking to their kids, especially the fact that they're getting a lot of these drugs over social media.
Mhm.
And so, we often say that we even think that later elementary school years are not too young to be hearing this stuff. And that I think is very important. And you also bring up a great point about how the mental health aspect really drives the addiction and the desire to try out or experiment with drugs. And certainly COVID did not help things with isolation and loneliness, and the lack of seeing people is just it's so sad. We're so sorry again for your loss, but applaud the work that you're doing. It's amazing work, and you're spot on about all of the stuff that you're discussing.
We want to invite everybody to our candlelight vigil on June the 10th.
Oh yeah.
Good Ground Park in Hampton Bays. Every year, part of the task force is to hold a candlelight vigil for anyone who's lost to addiction or any kind of accident, to come and remember your relatives or your friends with a candlelight vigil. It's at 7:00 in Good Ground Park on June the 10th. And everyone's invited. It's free.
Thank you for letting our listeners know about that. That sounds beautiful. A beautiful tribute to your granddaughter, Hallie. We are going to take a little mid-wrap break. At this point, everyone knows someone who has died this way, and it can be prevented. Please educate one another. Parents, please talk to your kids. It may be the most important discussion you'll have with them. So act now. Don't let the time pass, thoughts disappear, or certitude for your child's judgment make you pass the opportunity. I have kids, and the most important thing as a parent is keeping our children safe. We are living in a different time now. The U.S. is in crisis. Fentanyl has flooded the street drug supply, and one pill can end a person's life forever.
I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. Ooh, oh, you say I'm loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I'm strong when I think I'm weak. And you say I am held when I am falling short. And when I don't belong, oh, you say I am yours. And I believe, oh, I believe what you say of me. I believe the only thing that matters now is everything you think of me. In you I find my worth, in you I find my identity. Ooh, oh, you say I'm loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I'm strong when I think I'm weak. And you say I am held when I am falling short. When I don't belong, oh, you say I am yours. And I believe, oh, I believe what you say of me. Oh, I believe. Taking all I have and now I'm laying it at your feet. You'll have every failure, God. You'll have every victory. Ooh, oh, you say I'm loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I'm strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short. When I don't belong, oh, you say I'm yours. And I believe, oh, I believe what you say of me. I believe, oh, I believe, yes, I believe what you say of me. I believe.
Welcome back. Here we are with Drew Scott, an award-winning former television news anchor and reporter who is sharing his heartbreaking story of losing his granddaughter to the opioid epidemic and fentanyl poisoning. Here's Kurt, or I'm sorry, rather, here's Aisha to continue where we left off.
So Drew, I wanted to ask about your work as a White House correspondent. So what have you learned about this crisis on a national level, just in terms of you reporting?
I worked in the White House for Tribune Broadcasting. It was back in the 80s during the Reagan administration. It was a fascinating time. It was we watched the entire 4 years of the Reagan administration. I covered Capitol Hill as well. And the work that we did was seen on the Independent Network News, INN, which was broadcast on Channel 11 in New York City. And it was covered in 80 other markets throughout the U.S. So it was a fascinating time. I remember there was a time when I went to go get my White House press pass, and my bureau chief reminded me. She said, "Now you're going to get." You're applying for a press pass for the White House. So just be advised, and this is off the record, that the Secret Service routinely taps your phone for 6 months when you apply for a press pass.
Wow. Okay.
So be careful what you say. So we had to be very careful about what we said about President Reagan at the time, but it was. I successfully made it. There were no problems. I was asked by my bureau chief one day to go and cover a routine stakeout. We call them stakeouts because you would go with a camera crew and you'd wait outside of a place where the president was making an appearance or giving a speech, and you'd wait for them to come out and they'd wave to the crowd, maybe make a statement, and then move on in a motorcade. And that was the end of it. So it was very routine. It was the first year of his administration. And so they sent me to the Washington Hilton Hotel. And we were standing there waiting for the president to come out. He came out and was waving to everyone. And suddenly shots rang out and people started falling all over the place. And we realized there was a man with a gun, and we all jumped on this man and tried to stop him, but he got off a lot of shots and he wound up seriously wounding a number of people, including the president. We found out later that he was hit in the lung and nearly died from his bullet wound. But it just shows you that anytime you cover something you think is routine, it's not routine. Immediately after the gunman was captured, I ran across the street and I had a quarter in my pocket, threw it in a payphone and called the bureau to let them know what had happened. Nobody had cell phones in those days, so I had to call it in. But I spent the next few days in front of George Washington Hospital awaiting his recovery, and then spent time in the White House when the Secretary of State, Al Haig, made his famous "I'm in control here" speech.
Wow.
It just was interesting that a long time ago, one of my teachers in journalism said, the profession you're going into, you will have an armchair history. And then I realized that teacher was really right when they said that, because we saw history unfolding right before our eyes. And then later that in the next year, President Reagan was in Berlin and asked the Russians to tear down the wall in Germany, and they did. So history was made again. So it was a fascinating time to be in Washington and to cover the White House and Capitol Hill. It was a great experience, and it's just part of covering news events over the years. I've covered a number of things. 9/11, one of them, which was something that I will never forget. I wasn't there immediately after the event, but the days after that, I was there covering the aftermath, and we covered these remembrance walls, what we later called remembrance walls. But people had loved ones who they had not heard from, who were in the towers, and what they did is they set up makeshift walls of plywood, and they would plaster a picture of their loved one up on up on the wall and say, have you seen this person? Please call this number. And there were at times hundreds of them all around Canal Street and south of Canal Street in the area where the towers were. And people were just had no notice of if their loved one was dead or if they were alive or trapped under the rubble. It was a horrible time, and just heart-wrenching interviews that you would conduct with people looking for their family members. So that's something I won't forget, not in a long time.
Wow.
But and there of course some of the other things that I was at the arraignment for Son of Sam.
Terrifying. Wow.
The Son of Sam suspect who was arrested finally after killing a number of young women with dark hair, and it was a reign of terror in 1977 in New York City. And so I was one of the reporters. At the time I was working with Channel 11, WPIX, and his arraignment was on a Saturday. And I was at the Kings County Hospital where he was being held, and the arraignment was held in the hospital. So they had to pick out a couple of journalists to be eyewitnesses to the arraignment. So I was picked, one of them. And we went upstairs to view the arraignment where he was presented before a judge and entered a preliminary plea of not guilty. And the first person he made eye contact with, David Berkowitz, was me. And it was chilling.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I can imagine. Oh my
Very
goodness.
chilling.
Well, it's chilling. I remember when that happened, actually. Yeah.
1970. The Summer of Sam, they called it.
Yeah. Summer of Sam, David Berkowitz. Wow.
I feel like some people, you can see it in their eyes, you know, oh my goodness. Wow. You clearly have like such an extensive career in reporting the news. And I was just thinking, like, you know, circling back to the 80s, you know, that was the same time that the HIV and AIDS epidemic was happening. And it was due to the fact that a lot of people were exchanging needles.
Yeah.
So can you say that there's been like a change in how we deal with public health crises now? And like in terms of like the opioid crisis and the fentanyl epidemic. So how do you think it's changed in terms of how we've been dealing with these crises?
I think that people are the government's just starting to wake up to the scope of the problem, just like it took government a long time to wake up to the scope of the problem with AIDS in the 1980s. At the time, I think the administration in Washington felt that AIDS the problem was just confined to the gay community, and it really wasn't that important. Was the feeling that I got anyway. It wasn't an official feeling, but that's what everybody kind of surmised from the coverage. But I know Hollywood and a lot of famous people, entertainers especially, started a public awareness campaign that was tremendous. And I think eventually the government came around. And I think the same thing is happening now with the fentanyl crisis. We see on the border, there are tens of thousands of people just streaming across the border, unchallenged, many of them coming from the Mexican border into the United States. And it's a shame because a small number of them may be just carrying fentanyl with them, arranged by the cartels. And the numbers are so awesome that the government can't stop the importation of fentanyl. They can even mail it in from China and from Mexico. And that's what's so scary about fentanyl. So the only way really to fight this problem now is through public awareness with celebrities, with people in the entertainment world, to really shine a light on this problem. And it's not, we're not talking about victims of addiction and having overdoses. We're talking about kids who just are handed a pill at a party, and because of their curiosity and their youth and their naivety, they take a pill because they don't want to be considered scared or chicken.
Yeah.
And they take a pill, and it's from a friend. Don't worry, it's good, it's okay. And one pill mixed in a fentanyl batch, they don't mix them carefully. They don't have any quality control in these cartel laboratories. So they may be ingesting pure fentanyl, and it will kill. Just one pill.
So, yeah. So you
That's the message. Don't take anything from friends unless you know that it's coming from a doctor or from a medical institution like a hospital or a medical center. Please, save your life or save your friend's life.
You bring up the border. Clearly the amount of people crossing the border evades authorities because they're overwhelmed. And so unfortunately, a lot of fentanyl is getting in that way. And we recently just interviewed Special Agent DEA Frank Tarantino, and he was amazing and gave us a wealth of information, particularly regarding the border and how problematic it is. But one thing, maybe piggyback off this question that Aisha was asking, where is the outrage in the media over this crisis?
I don't think there is. I haven't seen it. It's like we're in the early stages of the AIDS epidemic. There really isn't the outcry there yet, and that's why public awareness has to grow. We've got to shout it from the rooftops.
We often say that we're on a mountaintop, trying to scream this message out. And we one thing that that Frank Tarantino, Special Agent Frank, mentioned was, awareness needs to be put on social media, because that's where a lot of these kids are actually buying these drugs. But it's interesting that I find it appalling that they're not being held accountable to some extent, or that there's not PSAs that are mandatory to be put on their platform. That part is scary, because the kids that are experimenting that one pill, typically they're getting it from that platform.
Like a TikTok, Instagram, all of the social media that I subscribe to. Every week I put out a message. Almost every other day I'm putting out messages, and I get responses, but I'm just one little guy. I wish the people who have 5, 10, 100 million viewers, followers would do the same, because it would make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to say something about TikTok. I find that it really is a place where there's a lot of information and news shared on TikTok. I think that's where a lot of young people get their information. So I absolutely agree with you. I think TikTok specifically would be like a really good platform to share this message. And if it gets to like the influencers, and I think definitely like people will listen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Kind of switching a little bit, I wanted to talk about your commitment to the people of your community in Suffolk County and Long Island. So as a community leader, can you tell the listeners about the importance of organizing locally to fight for this cause? Because we just talked about how like on a national level, we feel that we're kind of, a little bit let down. So and can you just talk about how far you have come since you started, in terms of your advocacy and change?
Well, I'll give you an example. I'm on the I'm one of the co-chairs of the addiction task force in the town of Islip, and every year in October we have the purple Islip Goes Purple campaign. And what we do is we ask all the business owners and all the people in Islip to display purple as part of their support of the opioid and addiction task force in the town of Islip. And it's amazing that if you drive up and down Main Street in Islip in the month of October, that's all you'll see is purple flags, purple bunting, purple colors in the windows. It's becoming a community project, and it's very popular. So that's one thing to think about.
That's really
that.
good to hear.
For
Yeah.
Recovery Month in October?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
that's amazing.
That's amazing
So-
work. And that does make a difference.
It does.
And it's a camaraderie for the community.
Right. It involves everybody, not just shop owners, but customers, parents, grandparents, everybody. And even the schools are involved in getting involved in it as well. So we'd like to see this done in Brookhaven and in North Hempstead as well. North Hempstead is brand new. The supervisor of the town of North Hempstead is just setting up her task force now, and I'm happy to be part of it. But in Islip we have a recovery committee, and we have the candlelight vigil, and we're also involved in Recovery Month as well, using color purple. So if you see purple in the month of October, you know why that is and what is involved. And we just hope we'd like to see it year round.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure.
May 9th, by the way, is this May 9th is Fentanyl Awareness Day
Yes.
for our listeners to be aware of. So Aisha, that was a wonderful question.
Thank you.
So Ishrat,
Yes, Ishrat has some questions.
Oh, so I would just keep it short. I really just wanted to ask you one question though. What advice would you give someone who has lost a loved one to addiction and wants to enact change?
To turn their anger into purpose. You know, grief has stages. I never knew that until I experienced grief. You know, grief has various stages. First, there's denial, and then there's anger, and then you turn your anger and your denial into purpose. And a good example of that is Carol Trottier, who lost her son Alex
yeah,
a couple of years ago. I worked with her in the news business a number of years ago, and I've always admired how she's turned her anger and her grief into purpose now. And I believe you had her on your program recently.
We
And
have, yeah.
I was very happy to share a program with her last week, where she now is getting involved in community affairs and talking about what the terrible things that she went through. She lost her only son
yeah.
to fentanyl poisoning, and it's so good to see her using this terrible thing that happened to warn other families to not let it happen to them.
Mhm.
She would say it's the worst club to be part of.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love Carol. Carol, if you're listening, we all love you, and I think it's amazing work you're both doing. Yeah. So we're going to be wrapping up soon, but I think, does anyone else have any more questions to ask Drew?
So, following up on the question that I had, just another short one. I wanted to ask how is the grieving process different, and how did you? I just want to the transition that you spoke about from from grieving to anger, and then how do those transitional steps happen? And I'm trying to ask for people maybe who might be going through this, so they maybe can hear words that they need to listen to you from you. So
Well, it's when you lose a loved one to something as terrible as addiction or as fentanyl poisoning, you can go in two directions. You can hide it and give in to the stigma and be embarrassed and not want anyone to know that it happened to your family.
Mhm.
Or you can choose the other road and say, yes, it happened to me and it's happening to other families, and I don't want it to happen to any other families. So I'm going to go and speak out and warn people. And sometimes I get choked up and it's difficult to express myself, but I'm going to do it anyway and choose not to let stigma choke me and keep me silent. So I think giving into the stigma is the worst possible thing anyone could do when they lose a loved one to this terrible scourge.
It's very true.
Very true. And again, as a group, we are so sorry for the loss of Hallie, and we certainly hope that Ellison is doing well. If there's anything you want to add, Drew, before we wrap up.
Well, she posted a picture recently. There's a picture of she and her sister when they were at college in New York City. And she said, "I'll see you in my dreams."
Oh, that's touching. We're so sorry. What a beautiful girl. She will always be remembered, and the work that you're doing in her honor with your family is so admirable, courageous, and brave. And we're so deeply sorry. The loss, especially to something like that, is unthinkable. And I hope that everyone is listening to your story, Drew, and we will keep fighting along with you, and we hope more people join this fight, because I think it's everyone's problem. It has to be at this point. So Drew, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your heartbreaking story.
Thank you for having me.
Nothing but the best for you and your family.
Thank you.
So we have a few things that we add at the end of our show to offer some resources, and I'm going to play a special song for Hallie at the end. Here's Chloe.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for your strength, your advocacy, speaking up against the stigma and this disease. We are, all in this together, and it's so important to empathize with anybody dealing with addiction. You mentioned trauma. You're undergoing a massive trauma. You could be using this to use fentanyl yourself to numb that pain. Instead, you're speaking out, raising awareness, and helping to educate others so other families don't have to deal with the same horrendous pain that you are. Or, yeah, I'm so sorry. Please educate everyone, about fentanyl and various harm reduction measures to the listeners. There's narcan, there's fentanyl and xylazine test strips. You can send your drugs in for drug checking, like through mass spectrometry, to know what you're taking. And there's also supervised consumption sites like in Washington Heights and stuff that can help to reduce overdose. There's plenty of like various supports from things like Narcotics Anonymous and Smart Recovery, Life Ring. There's peer recovery specialists. There's a slew of professional treatment centers, IOP, inpatient, sober houses, things like that, case management for anybody who's looking for help. And here's Aisha to mention some additional resources.
Okay, so SAMHSA's treatment referral and information helpline is 1-800-662-HELP, which is 4357. Once again, 1-800-662-4357. And if you want to text, you can write to help, the number 4 and the letter U. Likewise, there's a free information service. It's free, confidential, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And their phone number is 1-800-487-4889, 1-800-487-4889. And then we also have the Never Use Alone hotline, which is 1-800-484-3731. They will stay on the phone with you while you're using to make sure that you're okay. And Taylor has the ending.
If anybody missed this information or wants to review our show, please follow us on Instagram at sbu.playitforward, and you can listen to all of our previous shows on our YouTube channel at the Play It Forward Project. We hope that our message reaches somebody, and it would be great to hear from you. So for now, always
keep playing it forward,
everyone.
Keep playing it forward.
You too, Drew.
Key.
So this is Allison of the Play It Forward Project, and I hope you tune in to our next show on May 26th with the pillar of our society, Father Frank of Hope House Ministries, from 1 to 2 p.m. Again, thank you, WUSB, our think tank, Kurt, Taylor, Chloe, Aisha, Ishrat, Orcadia, Serena, and Olivia, and of course, to our very special guest, Drew Scott. Drew, thank you again.
Can I just say one last thing?
Sure.
Recovery is possible. Let somebody rescue you.
Well said and perfectly put. Listeners, tune in and continue to follow Drew Scott and his wonderful advocacy. We are going to play a special song for Hallie Rae from her grandfather, Drew Scott. Lauren Daigle, Rescue, which was one of Hallie's favorite songs. You are listening to WUSB Stony Brook 90.1 and 107.3 FM. Be well, everyone, and please look out for one another.
You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. Though you have been broken, your innocence stolen. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. There is no distance that cannot be covered over and over. You're not defenseless. I'll be your shelter, I'll be your armor. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I hear you